Hello and welcome to the dashboard course by Trump Excel. I am Sumit Bansal, and in this video I will show you how you can use VBA codes to make your dashboards dynamic. So here I have 7 examples where you can pick up these short codes, quickly customize this for your dashboard and make it dynamic within seconds. So let's get started. So here I have some data. I have a date, I have sales rep name, country and the sales value. Now what I can do here is using these radio buttons, I can filter this data based on their country. So in this case, for example, if I say select Canada, then instantly this data gets filtered and I only have the records for Canada. If I select India, I would only have the records for India. Now you can create this kind of filtering by not using VBA, but that would be a longer process. In the backend you would have to create a lot of formulas, and I have shown this in a lot of my dashboards. But in this part of the video I would show you how you can use a simple 2-3 line VBA code to use this functionality of filtering by clicking on the radio button. So what I have done here is I have some code in the backend. So if you go to this tab name, right click and go to view code, and there you would see I have this window, and here I have module 1 and my code goes into module 1. So if I double click on this, you can see that here I have all these codes. Now if you're starting from scratch, what you need to do is you would not maybe have this module 1 here. You'd simply need to right click, go to insert, and then you can insert a module, and as soon as you do this it would insert a module for you. Double click and then you can type the code here. Let me simply show you the code which I have already written, and you can see it's a simple code. It's a single line code, but you see it as 3 lines because it's a longer one. And what I've done is I started with sub US, and this means that when I assign this code to the radio button for US, only the data for the country, this country, would get filtered. And here it says active sheet dot list objects. Now in my data this is a table. If you click on it you would see that I have these table tools design, and if you click on this you would see the table name is table 1. So in this case it's a table. Let me go back to the code again. I simply need to press Alt F11, and here I've said active sheet dot list objects, and here I have table 1. Now you would know that VBA is an object oriented programming where I would start with the bigger one, which is the entire sheet, and within the sheet then I refer to the list object, which is table 1. And now within this table I would refer to the entire range, and I would say auto filter field 3, because in this range filter field 3, which is for the country. So if I show you here, you can see that this is field 1, field 2, and field 3 is for country, and the criteria would be US. So in this case filter this field, which is field number 3, and filter it based on the criteria, which is the US, and then I end the sub, and that's it. I have created this simple code for all these countries. So I have it for Canada, the same thing copy pasted. I've only changed this criteria here, and the same thing is for India, France, and other countries. Actually it's still France only. And now when I click on France, you can see that now it would only give me the records for these countries. All you need to do is, when you have inserted the radio button, right click on it, go to assign macro, and here select the country. So in this case if it's US, I would select US and click OK. See what happens if I select, say, Canada in this case. When I click on this it would filter the records for Canada because I've assigned Canada macro here. I need to make sure that I assign the right macro. So here I would simply select US, and that's it. Now my radio buttons are there. I can click on it and then it would give me the right result. Now what if you also want another option here which says all countries? So I want an unfiltered list here. So to do that I would again simply either you can go here and insert a radio button, or you can also copy paste in and then assign a macro. So I would simply align it here, delete this text, and now I would have to also write a code for all countries. Let me show you. I already have the code. Press Alt F11, and here what I've done here is to get an unfiltered list, I would simply use the same thing, but I would remove the criteria part here, and you can see that I don't have any criteria here. And when I assign this code to this radio button. So I go here, assign macro, all. See what happens when I click on this? I have an unfiltered list. The entire data set is available. So now what you have done is, with these simple codes, you have created these radio buttons that you can simply click to filter the list. One thing that I want to highlight here is that in this code, I mentioned this is a single line code, but if you have to so if it's a long line and you want this code to show up in your screen nicely, what you can do is you can simply use this thing which is an underscore. So here, if I remove this, and let me show you, this code would also work perfectly. This is a single line code, but I want this to split this thing in 3 lines. I would simply have a space bar, underscore, and now I would hit enter. Similarly here, I would have a space bar, underscore, and now I would hit enter. So this is how you can split a longer line into multiple lines, but in this case you can also keep it as a single line thing. So this is how you can use a VBA code to filter results. Now, as we saw in the previous part, that you can use these radio buttons to filter the data. So when I click on, say, US data would get filtered, and if I click on India, then India data would get filtered. In this case, what I've done is I'm using the same concept. I'm using the same technique with a simple VBA code that would sort this data for me. So in this case, you can see that I have these radio buttons, and as soon as I click on this radio button, you can see that my data gets sorted here in an ascending order. In this case it's alphabetical, in country it's alphabetical. If I go to sales, then it's in a descending order with higher sales at the top, and if you come at dates here, then again it's in ascending order. So again, a simple VBA code would do this for you. Let me show you what the code is. I would press Alt F11, and here I have these 4 codes for each of these 4 columns. Now let's go through one of these. Here I have sub, sort, date. All of your VBA code always start with sub and end with sub, and this is for subroutine, and then in the middle you have your VBA code. Now I'll show you also one technique, that if you do not know VBA coding so well, if you do not know what should go in here, I will show you a technique that you can use. But let's first go through this code. Here I am saying that dim, and I am declaring this variable here. So that's dim sort range as range. So there is a variable sort range, which would be range, sort criteria as range, and then here I'm setting the sort range as table 1. So this becomes my sort range, which is table 1, and again you can see I've converted this into an Excel table, and my sort criteria here is range, table 1, and within square brackets I have these 2 parameters, all and date. Now this is something that it's unlikely, if you do not know VBA coding really well, it's unlikely that you would by yourself come up with this same format, and I'll show you how you can identify how to use this. But in this code, the idea is that I have a sort range, which is table 1. I have sort criteria, which is again a range, which I have set it as this range table 1. As date for the first one. So I've set the sort criteria as date, and then I say sort range dot sort, and then I would have these parameters, that key 1 should be the sort criteria, which is this one, date. Order should be ascending, and header Excel guess, which would mean that this would automatically identify that my table has headers. Now when I use this code, what it does is it would sort this data in an ascending order. But when I copy paste this here for sales rep name, I only need to make 2 changes. First, I need to change this thing here, sales rep name, because here I had date. I would simply change the name to sales rep name, and I would change the criteria in case I want to change, say, make it ascending or descending, then I need to make sure that I change this as well. In this case, this remains the same, so only sales rep name gets changed. In this case, it's country, everything remains the same. In case of sales, I have sales, and I have to change this to descending here because I want the maximum sales or the higher sales to come at the top. And this simple 5-6 line codes would do the work for me. When I click on sales rep name, it would quickly sort this data. Now, as I mentioned, if you are not aware of what should be the format of your coding or how you should write this code, a good idea is to use a recording macro feature. So what you can do is you can go to developer, and here you can start recording a macro. So what I would do is I would click on developer, and here I would click on record macro, and I can give any name. So let me give a name test1, and when I click OK, it has started recording this entire thing. Everything I do would be recorded in the macro in the backend. So if I click anywhere, if I right click, if I make any changes, that would be recorded. Now what I would do here is simply I would go to date, I would go to sort here, and I would say oldest to newest, and I would click on it, and I would now go back to developer tab, and I would stop recording. So what it has done is it has recorded my actions. I went here, I clicked here, I sorted this by date, oldest date is here and the latest one is here, and I have recorded this macro and all these actions in the backend. Now what I would do is simply go to view code. It has already inserted a module for me. I would double click on the module, and you can see this is the code that I have used. Now you may think that I barely did a couple of clicks and this is the entire code that it throws up, but this is how recording macro works. So it would give you a lot of data and lot of things here. All the parameters are figured in, and you can handpick what you want. So if you think about it, I really do not need this sort method. I do not need this orientation top to, maybe I need this. I don't need match case, I don't need anything else. So what I can do is I can simply customize this thing, but if you're not good with this, simply leave it out. All you need to do is now use this code, and you can change the date value here, and you can change how you want to sort this. So if the orientation here is say ascending, then you can change ascending or descending, and then you can use this code. Simply copy paste this code and then do it for other radio buttons and other columns as well. So if you are okay with VBA coding, if you're fine with writing your own codes, you can use the earlier version where there were only 4 lines of code. But if you're not very good with writing macros, simply use the record macro button, have this code in place, put it in the module, make those changes, and then you would have your dashboard dynamic based on what you do with this VBA code. Now in this part of the video, I will show you how you can use a macro or a simple code to create these buttons, and when you click on these buttons, it would hide the data or can show you the data again. So in this case, for example, if I click on this button, you can see that all the data that I had here is hidden, and if I go to show data, then I have this data displayed again. Now if you are creating a dashboard, or if you're creating data sets and you want to show it to a colleague, a client, a manager, then this could be really helpful because you may not want to show them the entire data set. So what you can do is you can simply hide the data, and if in case say they want to get more details on sales, then you can show them the data and you can see that okay, in 5 products this is the breakup of these total sales. So you can use a very simple VBA code to create this. Let me show you the code here. I would right click here and go to view code. You can also press Alt F11 to open the Microsoft Visual Basic for Applications window, and here you can see I have these 2 macros and it's just one single line. And what it does is here, in case of hide data, I say columns E to I, because that's where my data is. I have my data in E to I column, and I would say dot hidden is equal to true, and that's it. Whenever I click on hide data, this macro would run and it would hide this, and in show data I would simply make this false instead of true, and that is it. This simple one-line code would do this work for you. You don't have to go here and right click and hide the data or unhide the data. You can simply use these buttons. Now when I have the macro in place, I need to create these buttons, and this is nothing but a simple object. So I would go to insert and I would insert a shape here. Let me use this shape and create this here, and I would simply type show data here, and similarly I can duplicate it and say hide data. Now all I need to do is right click on this, go to assign macro. This would give you the names of the macros that you have created. So if you go back to the macro window here, Alt F11, you would see that this is the name of the macro: hide data, show data. And now if I right click here, go to assign macro, it gives me these two names, which is hide data and show data. And the macro name, it generates this name automatically. You need not worry about it. I would simply select show data here and click OK. So now this object has this macro assigned to it, which would run whenever you click on it. And similarly, I can go here, go to assign macro, hide data, and click OK. Now see what happens when I click on hide data. This data is hidden. When I click on show data, it shows me the data. So this is one single line of code that would do all this work, and I have used this thing in my work, and this really impressed my boss because he had this option now to click on a button and instantly he would have access to the entire data set. So that this sounded very cool to him and he was very happy when he saw this. So you can use this one single line of code to create something like this. Now this is an amazing technique that you can use while you're creating dashboards, or even in your normal worksheets where you need, say, data points from your users or from your managers, or if you're sharing this with your colleagues and you want to explain to them how this entire data, this worksheet, this analysis works. The idea here is that I have this object here, and when I click on this object, I want this help document to pop up. And when I click on it again, I want this to go away. So what means is that if someone clicks on this, he would know how to use this document, what all to do, where to enter the data. If it's a dashboard, how can the dashboard work? And it need not be this single pop-up or this single rectangular object here. You can have multiple objects and it would work the same way. And see what happens when I click on this, that thing goes away. And when it's a toggle button, when I click on it again, it would pop up again. So I have this small question mark here. It usually represents help menu if you go to websites. And similarly, I've created something here, and you can use this in the dashboard. Click on it and your user would have all the help menus, and he would know that if I use this drop down, this would happen. If I use this radio button, it would sort, or it would filter, or this can happen, that can happen. And when he's done with the help menu, he can simply click on it again and the help menu would disappear. Now to create this, the first thing here is that this is an object. This, I went to insert and I inserted this object here. And what I'm doing here using VBA code is I'm just hiding this when someone clicks on it, and when someone clicks on it again, I just make it appear. So let me show you the VBA code. I would press Alt F11 to go to the window, VBA window, and you can see it's a simple 3-4 line code. And let's go through it. What happens here, I would say if active sheet, which is this sheet where I have this macro, dot shapes. Now these kind of objects, these images, are under the shapes category, so I would use dot shapes, rectangle 3. Now if you do not know what this is, simply click on it and you would see that it says rectangle 3 here. So I've used this name for this object. Let me go back by pressing Alt F11, and here I'm saying if active sheet dot shapes rectangle 3 dot visible is equal to false, which means that if this is not visible, then make it visible. So I say if active sheet dot shapes dot visible is equal to false, then active sheet dot shapes dot visible should be equal to true, else it should be false. So what I've done here is I have made this as a toggle button. When you click on it, it would first check whether this is visible or not. If this is visible, it would make the visible property as false, and if this is not visible, then it would make the property as true. And that is it. This is one simple 3-line code that would do the trick for you. When you click on it, it would hide this, and when you click on it again, it will show up. I have used one single object here, but you can do it with multiple objects. So for example, if you have a drop down here, then you could have something like this thing here, a call out, and you can simply say, put some instructions here, use this drop down to show the sales only for say 2012 or 2013, or you can say click on the radio button to sort this data, filter this data, and when you click on this thing, then this would go away. So this is how you can create a toggle button and use a toggle button to hide or show objects. In this part of the video, I will show you how you can use the double click property to fire a macro. So I want to double click on a name on a cell value, and I want something to happen. So what happens when I double click on any regular cell? See, if I double click here, it would go into the edit mode. I can go and type anything, or even if I have a formula, it would go into this edit mode. But what happens when I have a backend code here and I disable this double click property and make a VBA code so that something happens, a code runs whenever I double click? See what happens here. When I double click on Greg, see, this value changes. When I double click on Mike, it doesn't go into the F2 edit mode. It shows me this value. This box gets updated with the value for Mike. So you can see that when I'm double clicking on it, something is happening in the backend which is making these values change. Now imagine if you have a dashboard where you are showing the sales rep performance. You can simply double click on Mike and the entire dashboard would get updated, because in the backend you have enabled this macro where when you double click on Mike, then the values change. So let me first show you the backend data. Here I have date, I have sales rep name, I have country, and I have the sales. And I have used a simple formula here, a SUMIF formula, to get all the sales done by Mike in this data set. And if you change this, you can see it's dynamic. If I make it Greg, these values would update because here is a SUMIF formula. My intention here is that when I double click on this on these cells, this cell should get updated based on where I have double clicked. So for example, if I go back and I double click on rows, say I double click here, I want this cell to get updated with the name rows, and as soon as that would happen, this formula would automatically update. So see what happens. I double click on rows and this cell updates itself with the name rows, and when this happens, this value gets updated and this box get updated because I have linked this box to sheet 1 G3 here. Now what I need to do is I need to write a very simple code which would first of all disable this going into the edit mode when I double click, and second, put this value in this cell. So let me show you the code. I would press Alt F11 and here you have the code, and I have used an if condition to check for these cells because I don't want this property to happen for all these cells. I want that if I click on only these 4 cells, then it should happen, but if I click anywhere else, it should function as normal. So I press Alt F11 and here is the macro, but you can see that there is no module here. The reason being that this is a worksheet macro, which means that it would only work in this worksheet. I have not inserted a module here, and the reason is because I'm using a property which is called before double click. So what happens is I am on sheet number 2 here and I want this code to work in sheet 2. So if you double click on any of these sheets, they would have their own code window, and you can put code here that would work only for that sheet. So see what happens when I click on sheet 1. This opens the code for sheet 1. When I click on sheet 2, it opens the code window for sheet 2, and it would say worksheet here because now this macro would work only for this worksheet. This is the object here, and this is where I can select what I want. If I select, say, activate, and let me show you. So I would come here, and if I select activate, it inserts this part, private sub. Private sub means this is only for this worksheet, and it says worksheet underscore activate. And what this does is whenever you would activate this worksheet, this code would get fired and then it would do something, whatever you specify here. Similarly, you have all these options: before delete, before double click, before right click, calculate, change, deactivate. A lot of things can happen here, but what I'm interested here is I'm interested in the before double click macro, and when I select this, it would insert this part had I not had this thing. So let me copy paste it and then delete this entire thing. I would come here, I would select worksheet first from here, and then I would select double click. Before double click, I can delete this part, and now I have this code here, and what it says is before double click When you use this macro and when you double click on it, there are two things that you need to take care of. First is the target. Whenever I double click on a cell, that cell is my target cell. And second is cancel as boolean. And here cancel means that when I double click, it gets into the edit mode, whether I want that or I don't want that. And I would simply use the code that I have created here. So this is my code, and these are the 4 lines of code that I've inserted. And what I say here is if the target dot row, and target would be the cell where I double click, if the row number is more than 2 and the row number is less than 5. So now it would cover all these rows here. If the row number is more than equal to 2 or row number is less than equal to 5, and the target dot column is equal to 1. So when I specify these 3 conditions, it would mean that I can only have this for these 4 cells. A row should be greater than equal to 2, less than equal to 5, and column should be 1. So it would give me only these 4 cells. If this is true, which means that if I double click and if it is among these 4 cells, then the first thing that should happen is cancel is equal to true, which means that do not go into the edit mode. And the second thing that happens is sheet1.range.f3. In this sheet, cell F3 gets populated with the value of the cell where I double click. So in case if I double click on Mike, then this value would go into F3 in sheet 1. If I double click on Greg, then it would go in sheet 1 and in cell F3. And that is it. Now when I use this code, if I say show you here, I have rows here. When I go back and I double click on Greg, this cell goes to Greg. So this is how you can use a before double click event to manage your dashboard. You can simply double click on a name. This could be a year, this could be a quarter number, this could be a region name, and then your entire dashboard gets updated. I have used this property, this VBA code, in my Game of Thrones dashboard, which is also part of this dashboard course, where you would see that when I double click on any of these cells, in that case I had characters. So when I double click on these character names, there would be an entire profile of that character, including the image and a lot of details that get updated. So if you're interested in this technique, go back and look at the Game of Thrones dashboard. It's really fascinating. So now so far we have seen VBA codes that would work when you run that code manually by clicking on a button or going to developer tab and running that code manually. We have seen how you can use worksheet events like a before double click event, where it would get fired whenever you double click or you change the activate the worksheet, deactivate the worksheet, and all those things. In this part of the video, I will show you how you can also create formulas using VBA. And in this case, I have this example. I have these country names, and I have some of the names which are in bold font format and some which are not. Now this is something that happens very often, where some people would simply go and make the font bold, and then you would be required to extract that data point or identify that data point or maybe filter that data. So to do that, I have created a simple VBA formula. It's a one-line code that I've used, and let me show you that formula. So I would press Alt F11. Now, as in case of formulas, again it goes into the module. So when you double click on the module, it would open the code window, and here you type the formula, and you would have to create this function. So far we have seen that our code starts with sub, but in this case it would start with function. And when you start it with function, it tells VBA that now what I'm going to create would be a function that should be used in the worksheet. So now my function name is bold font, and if you think about it, this is something like VLOOKUP. So if I'm creating a formula like say VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP, then I would have put that name here. But since those are already there in the worksheet, I'm creating a new formula here, which is bold font. And here I would specify the argument that this formula can take. And in this case, it's one single argument, which I call cell ref. And this argument would be of the range type, which means that it can take cell references. And now this is the code that does the magic. It says bold font, the value of this formula, the value that it returns would be the value here, which is cellref.font.bold. Now if you bold a cell in Excel, this is a property that becomes true. But if that cell is not bold, then this would be false. Which means that if I use this formula and I give say cell A1, and if A1 is bold, it would be true, and if it is not, it would be false. Let's go back to the worksheet, and here I already have the formula created, so I would use bold, and you can see that it prompts me the same way it prompts all other functions, which is say all these functions. And when I type BOLT, it is now a function, and when I hit tab, it would give me this entire function name. It would not give me help on the arguments, because I have not, this is something that I have created and I have not specified it, but it would still give me these prompts of the name of the functions. And now I would simply refer it to this cell, which is A2, and see what happens. When I hit enter, it gives me true, because this cell has a bold font formatting applied to it. And when I double click on this, it would give me trues and falses based on whether the cell is bold or not. And now if I have to filter it, all I need to do is apply filters to these. So I would use the keyboard shortcut Control Shift L, and now I can simply select true, and I would have all these cells which are in bold font formatting. Maybe you would want to highlight these, color these, or maybe just change the formatting to normal. So this is how you can use a simple one-line VBA code to create a function that would help you do these things. So here I have the sales rep name and the sales data, and I have plotted this on this chart. And what I'm going to show here in this video is how you can change the chart type by clicking on these buttons, or creating a macro that would do it for you. So if I had to do it otherwise, I would right click, go to change series chart type, select the chart that I want to create, and then I would click OK, and then it would update. In this case, it would rather be a simple thing. Simply click on this button and the chart type would change. And I only have 2 buttons here, but you can have as many as you want. You can have these for series, different series as well, and you can control a lot of charting properties. But the idea here is to introduce you to how this can be done. And since you have followed all the previous examples, you would now know that all I'm doing is simply changing a property, which is the chart type property. So let me quickly show you the code. I would press Alt F11, and here I have these 2 codes here, which is a line chart and bar chart. And all I do here is I first activate the sheet. I first refer to the active sheet, and then within that active sheet I refer to the chart objects. So as I mentioned in one of the previous examples, you saw that we refer to the shapes object. In this case, we are referring to the charts objects category, and within that I have the chart 1 that I would use, and I'm activating that chart. And then with the active chart, I'm simply changing the chart type to Excel line here, and the same code is copied here. With the minor change here, I'm making it Excel bar clustered, and that is it. This is one code that would simply change the chart type if you click on these buttons. So I just inserted these buttons, right click, and then assign these 2 macros to these buttons. And now when I click on it, you can have these chart types in different chart, say bar chart or column chart or line chart. I have seen a lot of dashboards where people give these options as checkboxes, as radio buttons, or as small buttons, where you have this option to change the way chart looks. So you can use a bar chart or a line chart, or maybe you can use a scatter chart, and there are all those other options. But the idea is that what happens basically is, in the backend, it simply changes the chart type property. So that's it in this video. I hope you found this video useful. The idea to create this and give it to you was to introduce you to VBA coding and how it can be used in dashboards. See these simple 1-line, 2-line codes that can quickly make your dashboard dynamic, and you saw that these are really easy to customize. So I have given a download below this video. You can download all these example files and you can have these codes ready with you, and whenever you are creating a dashboard, simply copy this code to the module or to the worksheet window, code window, and just customize it based on your data in your dashboard. So this is it in this video. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you and have a nice day.